Welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see so many of you. We are over 40 in this meeting today, in this seminar today, webinar today. But the whole community is over 100 people, 125 people who have joined the Site B community. And we hope to work together, think together, research together in the future. Um, and we wanted to sort of uh, position ourselves with this position webinar and offer some of our ground thoughts on the directions that we are taking with drama and theater in education. And that's why we are hosting this event today. I just want to share a couple of sort of housekeeping rules or suggestions. What we'll be doing today is it will be mostly us talking and proposing thoughts and ideas, but we are inviting you to place your questions or comments in the chat. Thank you for many of you for already starting to do that and sending your greetings to friends who you know here in the room. And I invite you to keep doing that throughout the session. We'll be shifting speakers, and all of us will be proposing and sharing different thoughts and different ideas. And we hope that in the end, we'll have time to reflect, to come back to the questions or comments that you have made in the chat. We'll see how time goes by, but we're trying to keep the meeting quite brief. And we are, as I said in the email, we are proposing a next meeting on the 21st of April, same Tuesday, same time, when we are inviting you to speak. We'll be sending out the recording of this session to all in the community. We'll be also sending out a paper to all in the community, paper written by Professor David Davis. And we'll be inviting you to come back with your thoughts, comments, questions, queries into this next meeting where we'll be asking you to share your thoughts. We'll be proposing a specific way of doing that, but we'll come back to that later, and there will be details in the email how we're proposing to do that. But for now, I'll stop here. I'll pass on to my colleague, Xiaoxi, who will be introducing this whole Site B project. On to you, Xiaoxi.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Hao Xi, and I'm from China, but I'm connecting everyone from Glasgow today. And so SciB is a small group of five. As you can all see, we're all here, and we're working across different continents. Adam, who's from Hungary, but he works in European countries as well. And Kostas is from Greece, but teaching in Norway, and Professor David Davis in the UK, but has students all over every country almost and across many continents. And Chris is from the UK, but works internationally and has been working with me in China, Hong Kong, Macau for the past 16 years. So about our group, so a few years ago, we started to meet regularly. And I think this whole proposition really starts from Bill Roper's critique of David's work from a conference at Trinity College in 2019. And so I think most of you probably have seen the papers, collection of papers on the internet, and in it, David lays out one of the central pursuits of his work, which I suppose we can all share, even though we work in different contexts, which is to enable young people to be the subjects of their own identity. And this whole thing came out because of a response from Bill that there's a challenge in working and how we might be understanding drama, really, particularly around the dimension of human consciousness and how consciousness itself can be limited and can be partial and can be misleading as well as affecting change. So there's a suggestion there that there's a whole other elements of concerns that us drama teachers have not really explored enough or have not really taken account to, which is to do with subject, which I believe that Kosa is going to talk with more details later, and also to do with affects and feelings and emotions and experience in general, the neurosciences of human minds as well. And I think what has been what has become really clear in the past 3 or 4 years is that what big businesses really are interested in shaping minds and shaping neurons. And this seems to be the interest of drama and, broadly speaking, education as well. So this question to all of us is about how to really take control of our neurons. So there seems to be a whole areas of that, and then combined with affects and in relation to psychoanalytical way of seeing human consciousness, language, etc. So this whole provocation sort of stay with us, and we meet regularly, a few weeks side, and then talk about our ideas and testing things and writing plans and writing articles and long letters and discussing about these areas that we don't pretend that we have the expertise of. We don't pretend that we know every little things that we're going to share this, but we have organized series of webinars to share thoughts and ideas. And but now we want to open this out into a wider community. So we have a group of drama teachers around the world, and we're also trying to work in the same context, the same kind of social political context that we're all in. And so we're really trying to invite everybody to join this community, to test ideas, to share our struggles in our own work, to bring perspectives from different countries and different contexts, to think together about what is at stake in drama and education and broadly in arts education. And so this is not about SciB as a group speaking outwards. It's really about beginning something that can be developed collectively. Um, and I think it's important to say that there's a reason that this feels urgent to us, because we're working in a time where the world is unstable, where social, political, and environmental pressures are intensifying. Young people are living within that kind of reality. So it's really an attempt to hold on to something human within all that. And so that's us. And I'm going to hand it over now to Chris, who will begin by setting out a broader frame. So looking at the current global situation, the kind of political and social conditions that form the context for, the side A of what we're going to discuss today.
Okay, thank you, Toshi. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see so many familiar and new faces. So I want to reflect on the kind of conversations we've been having in Site B. So although I'm not speaking for the group, I'm attempting to express my own understanding of the global context that we're living and working in. So to be clear, I'm no expert. I have no expertise in this at all, only my experience. And I also want to acknowledge, I should say, sorry, that as a white baby boomer Englishman, I no longer qualify as middle-aged. I'm speaking from a position of privilege. I began thinking about this through the 1945 post-war settlement, the enshrining of international law in the 1948 Declaration of Human Rights, the progressive national liberation struggles, and the end of colonialism. Contradictorily, 1948 was also the same year as the Palestinian Nakba. I then traced how these progressive developments have been gradually undermined and reversed by a counter-revolution that accelerated during the 1973 oil crisis, the emergence of monetarism, the destruction of the Soviet Union, triumphal globalization, and the neoliberal project for a new American century. All of this, with its neo-imperial adventures in Iraq and Afghanistan, the ongoing assault on the Palestinians, and the epoch-defining financial crash of 2008 have resulted in a vast redistribution of wealth, which has only increased oppression and hastened the onset of ecological breakdown. And the realization, the felt understanding in my bones that humanity faces an unprecedented crisis that threatens the survival of the species. But I'll focus today on the new oil crisis caused by a colonialist Israeli and US war on Iran and Lebanon, which is an extension of the war in Gaza. The opposite of the post-war decolonization I referred to a moment ago. Because capitalism sustains a rising reactionary nationalism, ethno-nationalism, and fascism. And that's because contemporary capitalism is driven not by human need, but by the relentless pursuit of profit. It concentrates in fewer hands over time, takes new forms like cloud capital. Yanis Varoufakis calls it techno-feudalism, where markets are being replaced by platforms, competition is weakened by dominant gatekeepers, wealth comes from controlling access, not producing goods, an extreme form of rentier capitalism in corporations such as Meta and Google, Amazon, etc. And it's feudal in the sense that oligarchs have unprecedented wealth gained largely from rent and power gained from socio-economic and political control. But the war in Iran is proof that familiar forms of rampant profiteering remains. The main financial beneficiaries from the latest shock are oil companies, defense contractors, and certain financial actors, while the broader global working class faces higher costs of living and economic instability. Trump and his cronies are enriching themselves, of course, as the system opens up to unprecedented levels of corruption and government mafia style. A system that leads to persistent inequality based on greed, not temporary imbalance, where economic power translates into political and social influence. So these currently coexist with poverty, environmental degradation, and unmet basic needs, even when all the resources exist to address them, and they certainly do. But according to the philosopher Adrian Johnston, greed is structural, not psychological. Subjects, you and me, are subordinated to capital, not expressing themselves through it. Naomi Klein has coined the phrase end of times fascism to describe this situation. With overlapping climate, political, economic crises, a new form of far-right politics is emerging that combines apocalyptic thinking, conspiracy culture, and authoritarianism. She links the rise of conspiracy movements to the systemic instability which makes us vulnerable and susceptible to this end of times thinking. As psychologist Manos Sakaris puts it, we live in bodies that feel increasingly unsafe. Pandemics, climate change, sexual assault, systemic racism, the pressure of the gig economy, the crisis of liberal democracy. These phenomena create feelings of vulnerability that are quite literally visceral. They're visceral in the sense that emotional experience arises from how our physiological organs, from our guts and lungs to our hearts and hormonal systems, respond to an ever-changing world. They're also political, in that our feelings affect and are affected by political decisions and behavior. Sakaris writes that politics is visceral in the sense that our unsafe bodies drive our politics, a reflection of the failure of our socio-economic system to take care of physiological and psychological needs and how the world makes us feel. Whereas politics should make our bodies feel safe and empower us to tolerate and explore the inherent uncertainty of the human condition. The opposite is true. And he notes it's not surprising then that political language has become saturated with emotion and affect. Affect and the manipulation of our emotions plays an increasingly significant role in how we engage with the world. It's not a question of what is, but how we feel about what is. The truth is fractured, politicized, and increasingly mediated by platforms that reward attention over accuracy. In The Origins of Totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt wrote that the ideal subject of a totalitarian regime is one for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, i.e. the reality of experience, and the distinction between true and false, i.e. the standard of thought, no longer exist. This only serves to feed the conspiracy movements that Klein notes often evolve into support for strong leaders, nationalism and repression. Leaders who can justify their actions, strikes against Iran, or ICE agents murdering their own people in the name of survival or truth. This engenders an end times mentality, a belief that society is collapsing or nearing a final battle, a powerful feeling that time is running out and society splits into parallel realities where people no longer share basic facts. The conflict between parallel realities is evident in how the genocide in Gaza is supported by governments all over the world and reported or not reported in the mainstream media. Trump and Netanyahu are now at the forefront of enacting the ideology of the far right, which Klein describes as a form of monstrous supremacist survivalism. There's no attempt to fix our problems. It embraces mass suffering while wishing to escape or dominate within the ruins left behind. It's an ideology that Klein states has given up on the livability of our shared world. The American journalist Chris Hedges notes that the genocide in Gaza is just the beginning, a new world order, an age of technologically advanced barbarism. He writes, "There are no rules for the strong, only for the weak. International bodies such as the United Nations have been neutered, transformed into useless appendages of another age. The sanctity of individual rights, open borders, and international law have vanished. The most psychopathic rulers of human history, those who reduced cities to ashes, herded captive populations to execution sites, and littered lands they occupied with mass graves and corpses, have returned with a vengeance, opening up a vast moral abyss." For him, genocide is not an anomaly. It is encoded in the DNA of what we now call Western civilization. But Trump isn't the cause of the crisis. He's the symptom of the deeper collapse I've spoken of. And politics has always involved feeling states. But the impacts of heightened social and political crises are greater now. Our physiological feelings colour our political opinions, which we then experience amplified via social media. This operates at once within each individual and at a societal level, as an intense feedback loop, often as echo chamber, emotively reinforcing prejudice and fixed positions. This makes us very susceptible to false narratives and what Emile Durkheim called distorted visions, which accelerate what he calls the anomie, which is rulelessness, at work in society. Societies are held together by a web of social bonds that give individuals a sense of being part of a collective and engaged in a project larger than the self. These bonds provide meaning, a sense of purpose, status, and dignity. These bonds are being eroded noticeably by technology and the political weaponization of technology. Anomie is a form of cultural self-harm by which society commits suicide in a polarized culture of enmity, intolerance, and isolation. Hannah Arendt draws on the relationship between loneliness and the politics of intolerance. And according to Noreen Hertz in The Lonely Century, feelings of being, quote, excluded and bereft of status and support, these dimensions of loneliness are a clear and growing danger here and now in the tenets of the 21st century. This breeds a loss of trust, status and esteem, and marginalization. Loneliness isn't just feeling bereft of love and company or intimacy, feeling ignored or uncared for by a partner, family, friends, etc. It also about feeling unsupported by fellow citizens, employers, community, and governments. And as the end of time fascist ideology takes a firmer grip, the authentic self is repressed. And the disconnect, of course, is not just a disconnect with others, but also yourself. Loneliness, isolation is a dialectic between an internal and external state, between the personal and the social, economic and political. And what is the impact of this crisis on the children and young people we work with and for? Well, loneliness has a powerful and well-documented impact on young people's mental health, increasing risk of depression, anxiety, and impacting emotional and brain development. Mental Health Foundation research cites that 40% of 16 to 24-year-olds report feeling lonely often or very often. 88% of 18 to 24-year-olds say they experience loneliness at least sometimes. In her books, Alone Together and Reclaiming Conversation, American sociologist Sherry Turkle draws on our attention to the process of becoming isolated and the need not only for us to converse as a species, but to reclaim something that's been taken away in the digital age. Talk has always been a motive force for culture, for all forms of development. And now in this digital age, it's more critical than ever. She identified that in the very early stages of digitalization, that the virtual spaces being created through various platforms were actually the vehicle for exploring our sense of self and establishing identity. But what she also noted is that the computer, in its many forms, offers the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. And as computer programs have become more complex, they compound this by offering the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship and without the intimacy that real friendship demands. And in further research, the young people she spoke to articulated that they actually preferred it this way. Her central thesis is that face to face, people ask things that computers, chatbots, or any form of AI never will. AI pioneer and expert Stuart Russell, who now devotes his life to stopping its unregulated development, recently stated that the greatest danger of AI is when we begin to treat it as human. Therein, he argues, lies the destruction of the species. Resistance is everywhere, of course, in the West Bank and Gaza, in Ukraine, Iran, in the US, where Meta platforms and other big tech firms were on the wrong end of two major US court rulings that went against them last week. Hopefully more will follow. In many countries and places, there is resistance where people are fighting for connection and community. And that includes us here. And what we can do as artist educators to engage young people effectively in their own lives. I'll stop there and hand it over to you, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, Saoshi, and thank you, Chris, for this contextualization. We thought it would be really important to discuss the context and the problems in this context that are having a direct effect on ourselves, our psyches, our consciousness. Because this is what we need to start out from when we discuss what is the role and what are the possibilities of drama and theater education in this context. And I'm going to invite David Davis, our teacher and mentor for many of us, to talk about this question. He'll be sharing the platform with Kostas Amiropoulos, who will be joining him in the second part of his talk. So, David, over to you. Can you hear and see us all? Have you sorted out the technical issues?
I don't know. Can you hear and see me?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, David. We can hear you and see you clearly.
Okay. Again, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Saoshi and Chris, for that. I mean, I should point out none of us knows what the other's going to say, so we're hearing it for the first time. So that was really, to me, really, really useful, Chris. Thank you, and so far. Now I've been asked to talk about the new theory of effect that we're working on, but I just want to go back to our last series of seminars that we ran, focused on Gavin Bolton's approach to entering a role, and he called that being in role. And this involved the role player being themselves, as well as the role, both at the same time, not standing back and thinking about the role, but living through the moment, aiming for a strong level of affective engagement. Our work towards this series has been partly focused on the alarming influences on young people, as Chris had been talking about, of spending so long on their devices and what sort of content is being thrown at them by money-making algorithms. We've also been exploring the exponential growth of AI, which moves us away from human feeling towards a more and more cognitive machine world. We've also focused on the growth of so-called AI friends, where those young minds are being taken over at the worst by damaging influences. Along with this, we've drawn on the latest research into affect itself, and it's that latter area I wanted to spend my time introducing. We've drawn on the groundbreaking work of Mark Soms, most clearly presented in his book, The Hidden Spring, which was published in 2022. Soms offers a solution to the age-old conundrum of how we humans have become conscious of our own consciousness. We're able to be self-aware in a way that animals can't be. I am conscious that I'm writing this and speaking this at a particularly dangerous moment of social history. I'm aware of the crucial importance, at least in my own self-aware eyes, of what we're trying to do to move forward our art form in the field of education. I'm aware of the social responsibilities I feel. I'm aware that I evolved from nature into a more than natural being, and so on and so on, but more of this later. But what is the source of this self-awareness? Specialists working in this area have been searching for which part of the cortex is responsible in our amazing brain, which has evolved over millions of years, and they've never been able to find it. Soms argues that it's because we've been looking in the wrong place. He argues that we needed to be looking at the reticular activating system at the core of the brainstem. This is where the input from our senses is processed and links with the cortex to protect ourselves and regulate ourselves, basically keeping ourselves alive and as safe as possible. It's the area where our emotional responses to our environment are received in the first place. So Soms argues, affect, feelings, and emotions are the source of our consciousness, not in the area of our complex cortex. Now, this argument is more fully explored in the paper which we will sent out straight away after this webinar. The basic argument is simple enough. We are sensate beings, and I'm taking sentience at its most general, meaning able to respond to the environment. A stone, for example, is not sentient. It might be degraded by erosion, but it's worked on. It cannot sense this erosion. It cannot protect itself actively. In the sense of responding to environmental factors, then all life forms are sentient. As life forms have evolved, we've become more sensate, and now our 5 basic senses, hearing, touching, seeing, tasting, smelling, are our most immediate contact with the world of which we're part. I'd want to argue without specialist knowledge that the most early life forms of billions of years ago were in a very primitive way sensate. They responded to the environment in a basic way as a means of survival. So from very primitive forms of organism, like the descendants of prokaryotes, which evolved billions of years ago, and in the form of bacteria, and now the most abundant organism around today, to potentially intelligent life forms like ourselves. From these early forms to intelligent life today, we've all been sensate. I'm stating what must seem obvious because I'm trying to underline what must be obvious in a way, that our sensate self, our affects especially, evolved millions of years before our cortex. So they came and still come first. Over billions of years of evolution, we move from single-celled forms of organism to higher forms of animal life, such as monkeys and then chimpanzees. At some point, our four-legged ancestors got up off all fours and became bipedal. Over millions of years of species dying out, each time something maybe better at surviving evolved. Eventually, we arrive at hominids. These early hominids developed thumbs and forefingers that could pinch together, which no ape can do. This enabled incredible developments in technology, eventually enabling writing and the beginning of human history. As our language has developed, as a species, with the benefit of our comparatively huge brain, we're able to deal abstractly with the concrete. This has enabled us to develop art, where we reflect on our experience of existence, enable us to develop science, where we can begin to understand connections and laws of change in nature and ourselves as part of nature. But to me, following Johnston and others, this makes us more than natural. That part that is self-aware, self-conscious, and able to work with incredible cognitive capacities. But this cortex developed because of evolutionary processes and did not just arrive. But this incredible cognitive capacity has become to be seen by so many of us, including psychologists, neuroscientists, and others, as our first response to the environment. But Somnus takes us back to our sensory input as primary. We are first of all feeling beings, not thinking beings. Although the emotional sensory input goes so quickly to different areas of the brain, it seems as though our thoughts come first. Soms argues that sensory input comes first, and in particular, that input informs our feelings and emotions. In common parlance, it's readily referred to in everyday language as fight or flight responses. But this is just one aspect of our emotional input and influence over our actions. Over time, with sufficient education of the emotions, we're able to develop those some say 7 basic emotions: lust, seeking, rage, fear, panic, stroke, grief, care, and play, following Pansex's analysis of them, into so many more. It's possible to find over 200 lists of over 200 emotions on the internet. You only have to think of how shades of social emotions have developed, for example, with greater sensibility and sophistication in society. So we now have emotions such as embarrassment, shame, guilt, contempt, indignation, sympathy, compassion, awe, wonder, elevation, gratitude, pride, and so on and on. But of course, this depends on the education of the emotions in home parenting and in education. And that is what is alarming us in our group. That education is fast disappearing. The movement now towards AI is for an avatar to think and interact with us. That avatar will never be able to feel as a human, in my opinion. And as a result of that lack of education of emotions, we're returning to more raw, primal forms of emotion, hate, envy, and so on, to cover our disempowerment by the social order, as Chris was talking about. This is what we're pursuing, to recognize feelings as the prime motivator of our existence. That long evolution of millions of years has resulted in incredible cognitive capacity, but that has been plonked on top, as it were, of that evolutionary development. And that leads us to see ourselves as led primarily by thought, not feelings. As Descartes erroneously stated, I think, therefore I am, which should probably be one factor in us coming to see thinking as coming first, despite the fact that there were millions of years of feeling development first. We're looking at seeing how this new theory can strengthen our drama work. It's work in progress. Our statement, therefore, focuses attention on a new theory of effect influencing our drama work, and of the importance of not just moving straight to thinking about the situation as we set up drama. However, I'd like to temper or moderate that. I don't see it about immersing ourselves in a feeling moment without deep cognitive thinking about that moment. That reflective dimension is crucial. It is not as though there's not a lot of feeling flying about at the moment. There's plenty of that. Zach Polanski, the leader of the UK Green Party, put it clearly the other day. Speaking about the left and right approaches to politics, he criticised the left for tending to be too based in information and too analytical, without an emotional dimension to fire people up. And he continued by contrasting how, quote, to quote him, the right is based in misinformation, but they have powerful stories that emotionally connect, and that's how they change people's minds. Again, note that extraordinary statement about being able to change people's minds. And in this last weekend's UK Sunday Times newspaper, there was an article on the increasing violence in primary schools in the UK. That's up to the age of 11. I want to dwell on this article, as it might seem as though I'm arguing that we have too little effect in our drama work, and therefore generally. And I want to draw attention to there being plenty of raw emotion around. The article relates the experience of a teacher in a mainstream primary school and her direct experience of too much emotion. It recounts how she'd been separating a fight earlier this year between two boys, one of whom had his hands gripped around the other's neck. He was biting my legs, this is a quoting, he was biting my legs, the back of my arms, scratching me, thumping my back, kicking me hard, she said. I'm trying to stop him getting to the boy through my legs and also defending myself. He kept trying to come round the sides, and I was thinking, please don't hit me in my belly. She was 7 months pregnant. Her experience is increasingly common. Government data shows the number of pupils suspended for physical assaults against adults in England's state primary schools, that is under the age of 11, rose from about 19,000 in 2018-19 to 40,000 in 23-24. Punching, spitting, and biting the teachers has become such a common occurrence at this teacher's school that she was given a radio in the classroom to call for urgent backup and wears anti-bite protective covers under her sleeves. She's removed anything in the classroom that could be used as a weapon, blunt scissors, the frying pan from the toy kitchen, rocks in the garden area, and so on. I'm going to quote one more section of this article, and I'm taking the risk of using the actual words quoted that the children used. In the article, they're asterisked out, but excuse me for using them, but we are all adults here. In recent months, she says she's been sworn at by many different children, and I'm going to quote, "Shut up, you fucking bitch. You fucking cunt. I'm going to piss in your mouth, you fucking stupid woman. I'm going to fucking cut your head off. I'm going to stab you. I'm going to kill you." These children are aged 4 and 5. What are we doing to our young people? This is the area our work is in part focusing on. There's a mountain of evidence that social values, mores are being eroded and working their way far too easily through society, and not least in our pupils, in our schools. This is the UK. Things may be different in other parts of the world, I do not know. But I'm trying to argue that although it's important to recognize the role of affect in our lives and in the drama situation, I'm arguing that this affect should be used to refine our emotions and form part of a child's emotional education. The article quotes teachers as saying that too much screen time, distracted parents, and poor teacher education support are a factor. But the Times is an establishment newspaper in this country, and the author and editor choose to focus on parents not being strict enough on their children. That's the problem. Too woke, in other words. And the article doesn't mention whether the pupils in question were special needs children or autistic. It seems intended to be sensationalist. It doesn't refer to the lack of support for children with behavior difficulties and the lack of support for such children. Nor does it refer to the manosphere influences around, nor the toxic culture in which we all live. However, all this points to deep problems in our society. I've chosen to quote from the article at length, as I think it goes to the heart of what we're dealing with. What is described is not children without emotions, but children high on emotions, but their emotions at their most uneducated, to put it in that way, primal, not socially sensitive, even brutal. It seems to me this is why a new theory of affect is of importance to us all. We're losing the richness of emotions and feelings and reducing ourselves back to primitive emotional reactions to events. So we're trying to move our drama work forward by bringing in this latest thinking about the importance of affect. I've tried to gather some of our key thinking without quoting from the paper, just to give a flavour of it. As mentioned before, the paper will be sent out after this webinar. I'd be very interested, as will the rest of our group, to receive your thoughts and feedbacks. We are seeing this as joint work in progress, and hopefully you'll join us. Thank you. I'll pass over to Costas now, who's going to talk about the complexities of regaining us or developing our subjectivity.
Okay, thank you, David. That was very interesting to hear. Now that's a problem, how to continue from now on, taking the thread from David. To be honest, I was unfortunate enough to be given the task to explain the complexity of the subject, especially under the theory of psychoanalysis, especially Freud or Lacan. Now, that's a difficult area, and I admit that I'm a bit slow. It took me years to understand some of it, which means actually I don't know everything. But it seems that this interest we have in Side B, bringing together neurobiology and neuroscience and psychoanalysis as a new source of inspiration, demands to go a bit in depth in both areas, by neurosciences and psychoanalysis. So I made quite a lot of reading. Doesn't mean I know everything, but to be honest, I don't want to scare people away with this by talking jargon, complicated language that doesn't make sense to most of the people. I'm not trying to say that you are as slow as I am, but I'll try to simplify the knowledge I have on that in simple terms, so I can understand it myself better, maybe. Now, as David has mentioned, we are inspired with from this new area of neuro psychoanalysis. So I will go on a little bit on the subject, how this subject is regarded, how this subject is formulated or produced somehow. It seems that this is a very interesting area to look at because it might have some implications on how we work in drama. We need to understand the subjects, the participants who are taking part in our dramas. So what is the subject? How is it possible to manipulate the feelings of a subject, of a person, as Chris has mentioned in the beginning? This is an inner world, isn't it? It's the inner world of the subject. Isn't that protected? Is it individual, subjective? How is it possible someone else to manipulate them, to control them? If affects are coming from the brain stem, which is deep in our brain, ancient part of the brain, how is it possible to be controlled towards a specific interpretation of feeling? How is it possible to externally impose a meaning on emotion? How is it possible to have misfelt feelings? Because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about misfelt feelings. You think you have a particular feeling, but actually it's not what you think. How is that made possible? And as David, or I think Chris as well, have mentioned, far-right and neoliberal discourses are exploiting this possibility. They're using feelings of hate, panic, feel distaste, threatened, etc., etc. How is being done? What makes this possible? What makes the subject, us, vulnerable to this kind of control? And then, finally, what does this mean for our drama practice? As I mentioned in the beginning, I don't know all the answers, but this is what I think Site B is trying to do, is trying to communicate with people all over the world in order to form a community where we can help each other by challenging maybe each other, by adding something in practice or in theory. So this is what we're trying to do today, and this is what I think I'll do my best to provoke. So I would like to start with an example. These examples make things simpler for me to understand. Maybe, I hope, it help you as well. It's an example coming from a book I've read many years ago, but somehow it helped me to understand bits of the theory that I'm trying to explain today about the subject. So I'm going to, well, the book, I need to refer to the book as well. The book is called The Lacanian Subject and is written by Bruce Fink. It's very clear, to be honest. One of the few books which are simple somehow. And I would advise you, if you want to go on with Lacan, you can start with this. And also another one, which I'm going to mention later. All right, so the example. Let's imagine that there is a 2-month-old baby in a cradle which starts crying. It seems that something is bothering it. The baby feels something. Maybe it's pain, which may have been produced by hunger or a colic or a cold. something that created discomfort. Yet the baby cannot express itself in language. Since it has no language, has no clue what these sounds, which we call words, mean, or even if they were meant to mean anything. It's in pre-linguistic stage, of course, and its needs are felt as pain or pleasure. But there are no actual names yet for the baby. According to neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, this couple, pain and pleasure, forms the basis of any later development related to values and the maps that children create to make sense of the world and navigate within it. Yet, in predictable circumstances, the caregivers of the baby will try to guess what is wrong with the baby, why there is a discomfort, and then try to ease it out and calm the baby. That's a predictable, normal circumstances. Now, the key word here to remember is guessing. We need to understand that we can only guess what the baby needs, how it feels, and what is the cause of its condition. There is no way that we can be 100% sure of any of its needs. In fact, this is almost impossible, or at least very hard, even for eloquent adults, let alone for a pre-linguistic baby. We ourselves also, we're not quite sure what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. We're struggling with our own feelings. Guessing, though, means that the caregivers do not always, most of the time, or not at all, manage to satisfy the baby's initial needs. Moreover, if you consider that, in fact, the baby itself does not know what it wants or needs exactly. The baby has only a general compass of pain and pleasure, of comfort and discomfort, that slowly and gradually navigates by making maps and gaining a sense of the inner and outer world. And since there is no language yet, it is impossible to name the need or even come closer to knowing it. We can only imagine what the child feels and needs, and most of the time this is not right, because there is no guarantee it is. So the caregiver must guess that the baby is hungry and so start feeding it, or may guess that it needs some comforting because it is tired, or hugging because it needs a bond or warmness, etc., etc. Yet the baby may be comforted, although it doesn't fit food with the initial need. Maybe the treatment of the discomfort does not meet the initial need, and so the baby stops crying. Is this proof that we suggest that we guessed right? It seems it is not, for the Lacanian theory, at least. What is happening there is that any need, even if it is not related to hunger, can be soothed by eating if the caregiver comforts the cry with food. The adult, in that sense, is imposing a particular meaning on a felt, unknown discomfort on the baby. No matter what the felt need was, food or a hug produced the comfort. Hug, anyway, is experienced mostly as a nice felt thing, isn't it? Warmth, softness, a bit of singing, moving the child, the baby in your lap. All these are comforting situations that do not fit with possible colic, yet the baby might feel comforted and sleep in our laps. The same it's true for the pleasure. How do we know how pleasure came to the baby? Is it smiling because it is satisfied with food, hugs, etc.? We don't know. It's not possible to know. But the problem here is, what is happening with the baby when these things are happening? on him, on it. What the baby is learning from this arbitrary pairing between the cause of affects and the random soothing. It means actually that someone else is defining what the baby's felt pain means and how to soothe it. A random comfort is tailored to the baby's distinct needs. An adult is imposing a particular meaning on the need and the comfort that may not fit the initial felt situation. So the baby learns some sense that any discomfort may be soothed by food, let's say, or something else. Adults, of course, when they do that, they use language, even if they don't speak out. They use it, for example, language to define what is the need of the child. They may say, for example, it's hungry, I need to feed it. So language defines the need and the comfort. The baby is hungry and needs the food or other things. So the baby has learned to soothe different needs with inappropriate treatment. Think of it this way. In our adult life, I might feel deep existential angst about who I am and how I should live, but I try to soothe it by buying more stuff. I'm manipulating my existential angst with consumer products. This is similar to what is happening to the baby in some sense. So again, there is another crucial keyword in this theory now, but may help clarify it more. It's the language. Language is made by others, not even by the caregivers of the baby. They also use a language which is being created by other people. And these other people used a language far beyond their own control. We can call these others the big other in Lacanian theory. It is related to social, cultural, and linguistic factors. It is something beyond our full control. It is there from the very beginning of our lives. Even our names mean something that is defined by others and the big other. The baby, in that sense, is immersed in language even before it is born. The room, for example, parents may think the room of the baby should be such and such. The bed should be warm and soft. The toys for the baby should be big, plastic, colorful. So, and if you take into account the gender, that would change again everything. The food of the baby should be a particular one. The school even that the baby will go in the future should be, I don't know which one. Everything is decided and described by language, even long before the baby comes to life or is even conceived. So language plays a crucial role here, and is the language used by the big other people and the big other. Eventually, the baby, according to the Lacanians, must learn the language to acknowledge and satisfy its needs. Yet, it is also trapped in words made by others. Their understanding, their own being is invaded and transformed by this other language. The felt situation is interpreted using words others have made and imposed on it. It is from birth that we have the predisposition to allow others to impose a meaning on what we think we feel. It happens imperceptibly, but it is an indispensable and unavoidable part of what constitutes a subject, or how the subject is created. Of course, this is not easy to accept, because it goes against what we feel is true from daily experience and life, experience of our own feelings and emotions and affects. We think that these affects are subjective and personal, and that we own them and recognize them. They are indeed our personal affects, but we do not own their interpretation most of the time. Now, there's a difference there. Their interpretation. What this theory, the Lacanian theory, suggests is that the interpretation of these affects may always be wrong. Our emotions might be misfelt, meaning they are misinterpreted by language and the big other. For example, turning back to the second example I proposed before with angst. The existential angst may be misinterpreted as a need to prove myself to others and to myself, as an insecurity about how I appear to the others and about what kind of story the images of myself present to the others. It is the imaginary constitution of the self and relates to the ego. Unfortunately, although we think that we own these images of ourselves, this is not true either. They belong to others. Someone else has created it. They are constructed by others. These images are in essence a departure from what we truly are, if there is such thing as true self. They create, in that sense, a split in the subject and self between what we think we are and who we really are. And that sense is so difficult to accept this kind of idea, Lacanian idea of the imaginary constitution of the subject, but it made me still remember the reactions some participants had many years ago in a workshop, a drama workshop in Greece. Most of the participants were female, all of them, I think, were female early years teachers. And when I mentioned this similar example, they felt uncomfortable. It seemed that there was a kind of threat. They experienced a kind of threat to their own identity as mothers. They start saying a lot of interesting things, which I'm going to use here. I'm going to quote here. They said, for example, that mothers do know what a child needs at any time. We have a natural bond that starts in the womb. We can see the baby and immediately identify the problem. There is immediate, unmediated communication between mothers through felt understanding. Motherhood is given by nature to women, and because of that, they have a natural, intrinsic ability to bond with their babies. Some feminists expanded on that and included all the people. And that's why women thought have more empathy than men. And ultimately, they were saying, what is you? Who are you? A man challenging the natural engagement felt by mothers with their children. Men do not naturally feel this bond, so they do not understand it. This is the image some women at least, have of their own selves. It's our own imagination. It's closely tied to our views, and any challenge to them may elicit strong reactions and the feeling of being threatened. We dislike the idea that someone may challenge the imaginary identities we think we have built for ourselves and fight or even die to defend them. It is our second skin. This is what Ederbond, the theater writer Ederbond, has mentioned many years ago. All these cultures, all these images become our second skin, and it's painful to get rid of it. It's like Hercules trying to take off, if you remember the mythology, the Greek ancient mythology, Hercules trying to take off his, mantle off his skin, and he was taking his skin out. And I'm afraid I just want to mention another example coming from Greece recently. We have a lot of Greeks here, and I'm sure that they could understand. Recently, there was a very strong reaction by a extreme feminist group against transgender people who were calling themselves women. The feminists claimed that there are only two genders and that only biological women can be called women. Okay, let's go back to this split. There is a split in the subject. It's not the first one, and it's not the only one. A series of consecutive splits are taking place in Lacanian theory, which alienate the subject from its own needs and its animal nature. As I said, I think I should better continue with that. According to Lacan, there is a stage called mirror stage, where the caregiver is creating an image of who is the baby, for example. That's the imaginary mode of the subject representing itself. It's related with the ego and narcissism. Later, there is the symbolic stage where the symbolic language takes hold of what defines the baby child or subject. We use language to explain ourselves. This is the symbolic language. Yet, as I said before, language is not ours and cannot fully describe us. It is deficient. It always fails to describe because it leaves something unrepresented. I'm saying, for example, I'm a man, but the word man cannot exactly describe what or who I am. I'm feeling that the word cannot describe the full of me. If I ask you now, everyone here, what a man means, I'm sure everyone will come with a different definition, conflicting or fighting each other. So there is no one thing defining what a man is. And this is not nature either. Being a man, declaring that you're a man or a woman, it's a symbolic thing. It's not grounded to any natural order or rule. Even the declaration, I am a man, is immediately deficient because it demands that I declare that I am a man. If there wasn't a question, I wouldn't feel the need to declare it. It would be naturally given and stable, seen all over the place. Now, it is rather existential tragedy to follow the manosphere's declaration today. What manosphere, how manosphere is expressing itself through men, and might be comic sometimes. The signifier, a man, the word man, is simply empty of the signified, of any signified. It can mean anything. So the subject, in that sense, exists beyond the symbolic. It's always more than the symbolic. Yet we don't have the words to explain ourselves and our feelings. We need to struggle with this split until we die. I'm afraid it is unresolvable. Yet, after the meeting with language and culture, we are never the same again. We can never be animals again. Until we meet language, we were animal. We're nature-based. After culture comes, we're not anymore animals. We're different. We cannot go back to being an animal. Some people, like Todd McGowan, a Lacanian theorist, make a connection and make an analogy to describe this meeting as a kind of a violent crash on the highway between two cars that drive in opposite direction. That's a violent crash. The animal is not recognizable anymore. Consciousness is made possible after this crash, and self-consciousness as well. The animal natural instincts, on the other hand, are changed, and there are a lot of byproduct, as, for example, the unconscious. which is not related with instincts, but it relates with the products of this meeting with culture, the animal meeting the culture. Now, psychoanalysis is dealing with the results of this collision. So the crucial point is to understand that actually there are a series of splits. We are always split. We lack things. From birth, we are alienated from our own animal selves. We lack a full, permanent, and stable view of who we are. We don't know how to live. We do not own most of or all of my images or of our images, feelings, and language. Yet we have our unconscious, which is created by what the symbolic, the language, fails to represent fully. So there is always a gap by this failed language, this failed representation, because always it fails to represent a feeling, a situation, an experience. All these extra meanings that remain unexplained, unrepresented, and unspoken are stored in the unconscious. In fact, these unspoken meanings are resisting any form of explanation, and unconscious is always challenging what the ego consciousness thinks it knows well and explains well. It destabilizes what we think we know well and what we think we can explain. It is rather radical in that sense. So there is always a gap of between what we think we know and what our conscious understands of what we're missing, actually. So, for example, can you remember some dreams you had which were uncomfortable, terrifying, anxious, existential angst, being deeply relaxed and loved, feeling the awe of the impossible, the beautiful, bizarre correlations, etc., etc. This is the unconscious trying to speak by using images, actions, and words. Now, it's not happening only in the dream, but it's happening also in awake life. I'm sleep age of language is one example. Doing some actions which we cannot explain why we did it, or we use some gestures we cannot explain why we did it. Strange things happening. It's like the unconscious is erupting and disturbing our ego and our narrative of who we are. Okay. The problem is, as Chris, I need to hurry up, I know. The problem, as Chris has mentioned and David, is actually that this gap is always contested area. Some, ideologies are trying to cover it up, and they're trying to impose their own narrative of who we are and what we should feel. This is how feeling is coming here. It's the interpretation of the feeling. So in that sense, far right, neoliberalism, and other totalitarian regimes and ideologies are trying to impose their own meanings on this gap. What does it mean for drama? I think this is what we need to explore. How, I think David, the paper is going to be sent to you, give some examples. I don't want to repeat them again, but I think that we need to take emotions and feelings into account in a drama and not just think about them. We need to help our participants to explore their feelings, find words to express their feelings, use the variety of feelings, as David said before, instead of just staying in the few extreme feelings of hate, disgust, etc., etc. Now, I had few more examples down there, but I think I should stop. I think I overdid it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, David, first of all, for sharing this, the importance of affect and feeling in the forming of the human consciousness, according to the latest research. And thank you, Kostas, for sharing some theory on how how feeling and affect is misused or appropriated, and why this is really important in this context that was shared by Chris before. We're running out of time, but thankfully everything was so clear that there are no comments or questions in the chat. Perhaps you didn't have time to write these there. And actually, we are quite adamant not to drag the meetings out for too long, because people really get tired on these online platforms. But we really want to open a space for discussion, because we're really curious about what your thoughts are, how this connects to your work and your feelings and possibilities with your contacts with young people. So we are going to offer this space for this discussion in 3 weeks' time, on the 21st of April. It's a Tuesday at the same time as today. And we hope many of you can come back and discuss these questions. To help that, to facilitate that, what we're going to do is we're going to send out the link for the recording of this session as well. If you want to look back at some points of it, or you've missed out, and also we're going to send out this paper by David. That is a very, very dense, theoretically based proposition for what the situation is and what we need to think about, what we need to do. We're also going to put this on a Padlet, which is an online platform, and we're inviting you to write your comments and questions beneath, in columns. We'll have 2 columns, beneath the paper or beneath the video. So we have time to see what we're actually forming a community, and we have time to see what others think about the paper and about the video, about these thoughts. So we really invite you to share your thoughts in this space, and we'll come back and we'll have the space to talk about these as well. I'll just check the chat, but I see there are gestures of thanks there, and no specific questions or comments at this point. We hope to see you again very soon and talk further on this question. We'll also be sharing the further ideas we have for continuing the work together in this community, which we hope will be an ongoing process, a longer ongoing process, where we get to know each other and get to test out different ideas collectively as well. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presenters for presenting, and thank you for your patience and your interested listening during this session. We hope to see you again, and we hope to keep this community growing and working together. Thanks a lot, and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye, all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.